Welcome to episode 3 of the Comedy.law Podcast. My name is Max Langley, and I'm here with Shirelle and Keith. Today, we're going to
Howdy.
be talking about a few good men, and we're going to interview one really good man about his experience as a surety claims handler. So,
Comedy Law, yeah, we're here to play. Max, Shirelle, Keith leading the way. Lawyers with laughs and jokes to slay. Tune in, folks, it's Comedy Law
handler. So, Shirelle, what'd you think about A Few Good Men? What did it get on your honesty scale? 1 out of 10. 1 to 10.
And while you're talking about that, Shirelle, that title is awfully sexist. A Few Good Men. I mean, talk about that too.
Actually, so I give the film a 9. It actually was really good.
Whoa.
It was my first time watching it completely, outside of the clips that you would see of Jack Nicholson's character and his famous lines. You can't handle the truth, but it really was a good film. I enjoyed Demi Moore's part. I do feel like maybe they could have given her a larger role as the only woman of importance in the film. But I mean, I wouldn't say the title was necessarily sexist because the film did center around these two guys who followed orders. They did what they were told, and they were, on trial for, I think it was murder. I'm not sure exactly what the charge was. So, but
It was.
yeah,
I thought Demi Moore did a great job. And I agree that she could have had and should have had a bigger role. But she showed empathy, and she had that understanding, and I think that was very important.
Yeah, she was the moral compass. She provided the high ground, so to speak. Like when Michelle Obama in her book, she says,
when they go low, we go high.
Joanne Galloway, that's who Demi Moore played. She's one of the first great examples that we see in pop culture of when they go low, we go high. She kept the high road the whole time. And I think it paid off in the end because she was able to persuade Daniel Caffey to not plea out his two clients to 12 years or however much time that was being offered by the prosecutor, and instead to actually take it to the distance.
Yeah, I think what was so key about Demi, first of all, she did a great job acting in that movie, but her understanding and compassion for people involved. And when she was asked, why do you like them so much? And she said, hey, they keep us safe. They are, nothing's going to happen on my watch. That's why she was in favor of the Marines, or especially these defendants. And it provided an opportunity and a reason, really, for Daniel Caffey to figure out what really happened here. Why did the victim die, and what happened there?
Yeah, that's how trial preparation goes, Shirelle. In real life, you do that. You do those sessions, those late nights, and it really is kind of a war. It's really tough. You got to be in the zone. You got to take those long days like they were doing and have those collaborative sessions to get ready for trial. And you're pretty exhausted, especially when trial's about halfway over. You're getting real tired. There's not a whole lot of human beings on this planet that can go through a whole trial and then just be fresh as a daisy.
I can imagine. So, Keith, I just have a question. Like, when you're preparing for a trial, what is the key thing that you try to keep in mind?
I think the key thing, Shirelle, is your story, and maybe you call it the elevator speech, meaning from the time you get on the elevator until you get to your floor. That may not be 30 seconds, but whatever it is, you need to have that theme, and people the jury or the judge are going to try to fit everything into your theme. So that theme, you've got to develop that early, but that theme is going to change, as Max said, as you learn more, and you're going to learn more as the case develops.
And how long does it take for juries to decide on average? Is it the opening statement or is it a little bit later?
The opening statement. So oftentimes by voir dire, which might be called voir dire, but when the lawyers talk to the jury at the very beginning, when they're selecting the jury, oftentimes the jury makes up their mind right there. But certainly by the end of opening, they've made up their mind, and they spend the rest of the trial trying to fit what they've heard into their belief of what should happen. So it's very important. Certainly minds can be changed, but most of the time they're not.
That's why we spend hours on those elevator speeches and trials. You pack a lot of time into those because there's a lot of punch in there and there's a lot of persuasion in there. There's a lot that can happen with that 30 to 50-second elevator speech, just talking to, and you really want to gear it towards talking to your 12-year-old niece, right? That's about right.
So, Shirelle, you talked about the cross-examination when the Colonel Jessup is on the witness stand, and you have Tom Cruise, and he's been encouraged by Demi Moore to figure out what really happened, and his solution to figuring that out is the cross of Colonel Jessup. What'd you think about that? Sure. When the colonel is on the witness stand at the end of the movie, before he admits that he gave the code red, we have a drama. We have the Tom Cruise character, influenced by Demi Moore, trying to decide, do I go after this guy on cross to get him to admit that he gave the code red? What did you think about that scene? That was my favorite scene, by the way.
Oh, I really enjoyed the scene. I'm glad that I don't know any of the characters' names, so don't ask me. I just know their real names. So when
Nicholson.
right. When Tom Cruise, I think I think the decision to question the colonel at that time was like the best decision he could have made. I think he was very confident based on how he read Jack Nicholson's character, of him being kind of arrogant and thinking that he knows, best for I guess the country, so to speak. So I think and I'm glad that he decided to just go ahead and Tom Cruise's character I'm speaking about, I'm glad he decided to like just push and just go ahead and ask the questions, because he knew that Jack Nicholson's character was going to be arrogant and he was going to just go ahead and admit it. And even I think there was one line where Tom Cruise has said, I think he wants to tell us that he ordered the code red. So I think it was intuitive.
That was so key. I mean, that made my scalp tingle when he says that, and he knew that because of that visit to Cuba and Guantanamo Bay, and when he asked for the transfer order, and Colonel Jessup, his response was, "You in your white uniform have to ask me nicely."
Right.
And that's the issue, right, Shirelle? That's how Tom Cruise knew that Jack Nicholson, the colonel, was hard-headed, maybe one way to put it, but he was intent on telling people, hey, I keep you safe. Hey, you need to understand how I keep you safe. And part of the reason I keep you safe is I give these code reds, which are go, beat up the private or whatever, make him more of a Marine.
Yeah, the visit to Guantanamo Bay reminded me of what we do in Surety when we visit the project site. There's so much good things that can happen when the Surety goes out there and does a site visit, whether it's with the experts or with the lawyers or both. Going to the actual project of where it went down, you can learn so much.
Yeah, Shirelle, I think that's so key. Max is right that you need to be there. You're only going to learn important facts by being there. What is your experience on that?
I think I agree with you. There's only so much you can get by having conversations with the different principals. Even talking to the claimants may help some, but to actually see what's happening on the project, you'd have to go and look at different things. And I think you can also kind of get a feel for your principal, and who they are,
Yeah,
their
you can.
character, their credibility. So I think it's crucial to spend time on a job site when you start to have issues and claims, on a bond.
What
So
do you
how
think about
often?
that, Max?
Go ahead, Shirelle.
I was just going to ask, how often have you visited a site where maybe the principal has a similar attitude as Jack Nicholson's character, where they think they know better
Yes.
than the
Oh
claims
my!
attorney?
I haven't been.
Maybe all the time.
Yeah, I haven't been in as long as Keith. I'll tell you, it happens a lot, and he's going to tell you it happens a whole lot.
A whole lot. I mean, we all know, hey, things happen because people do them. So you need to understand. And I think that's what's so important about A Few Good Women is they add to the understanding. Oftentimes, the other half, the male half, doesn't show doesn't really feel the empathy,
Yeah.
the understanding. You pretty much have to understand, hey, who's the principal, what have they done, and who is the obligee. And there's usually some tension. There's a butting of heads there, and you have to figure that out to become, hopefully, the peacemaker to deal with getting to the finish line. But you can't do that until you understand the personalities you're dealing with. That's very, very challenging.
Mhm.
We had one personality, Shirelle, that kept telling us to stay in our lane, and I was just like, "Which one's our lane?"
That happened to be a principal.
Wow.
Imagine that.
Wow.
And that's not the worst thing that's happened. I've been cursed out at a deposition before because I did so terrible, according to the principal. But then we win the case, and I'm like, "How terrible was it, huh?"
Did you get an apology? I assume not, but
No,
maybe.
I'm
No,
waiting.
no, no, never.
Never. Yeah, if the day I get an apology is the day that I will register the website myprincipalrocks.com, and I'll put that principal on there, paste their face on there, and say,
Yeah,
"Hey, look,
you
this
get
was
an
wrong."
attaboy, hey, great job, but you never ever get the apology that you should have gotten.
No, yeah.
Right.
It's because there's a lot of tension. There really is. The obligee wants one thing, the principal wants one thing, and it's a zero-sum game. So both can't get what they want. So there's going to be necessarily a lot of tension, a lot of emotion, and the males tend to kind of stir the pot a little bit, just in my experience, and females tend to resolve the issues a little more with the pot stirring, right? They tend to say, "Hey, let's try to find, a mediated resolution. Let's try to talk about how we really feel and come to the right solution." So you want both the Demi Moore and the Tom Cruise. If you can combine those two, then you've got a surety soldier that knows how to get to the truth and to do it the right way.
Well, Shirelle, generally my experience is the surety wants to be the problem solver, And to be that problem solver, usually you have to mediate, you have to get in the middle and deal with the principal on one side and the obligee on the other. What is your experience and how do you deal with that?
Um, I'm sorry, my computer's a little frozen. Can you repeat it again?
Sure. Usually the surety, in my experience, is going to be the problem solver. You generally need to find a way to solve the problem to get the job finished. And your first goal is to solve the problem, and then you can deal with the blame. That's secondary because time is money. My experience is that you do need to go to the property, you need to go to the project, you need to see what's going on, but you need to have a whole lot of conversations with the decision makers. What is your experience?
I mean, once again, not a lot of experience, especially on the performance bond side. The performance
It's
bond side.
coming. It's coming
Like,
soon.
definitely. I mean, the little experience that I have, I do agree with what you're saying that it is important, to have conversations to get a really good idea as to what's going on. You definitely want to talk to the owner of the project. You want to talk to your principal because those are the people who ultimately have the issue that you need to resolve. So I think it's really important, like you said, to talk to the decision makers. Otherwise, nothing gets done. You know.
And I think that's what's so important about Demi Moore's role in this movie is she understood or sought to understand what people were doing and why they were doing it, like the defendants, and why did they act upon the order to deal with Santiago in a fairly harsh manner, and the importance of orders in general to Marines. That's a big issue in the movie. And at the same time, she's got to look at, hey, I'm trying to deal with this murder charge, and I'm trying to deal with the private and his superior who's also charged. It's a very hard thing. Lieutenant Caffey just wants to get to the finish line, just get a plea in
Get
play.
those fake knives. Number
And
45.
yeah, he was ready to get that prize because if he could settle one more case quickly, he got the steak knives.
Yeah, the big tension in the movie is obedience versus integrity. It's
Right.
doing what you're told versus doing the right thing. And that's the hard part too. And when I first started, when I was a baby lawyer, Keith put a big message on my desk, says do the right thing. We do the right thing. That's it. He wrote that in big letters, do the right thing. That's what we do as the surety. We always do the right thing. We don't do the thing that people are yelling at us to do. We do
Right.
the right thing.
Yeah. So on that point, Shirelle, here we have two defendants, and at the end of the movie, they're charged with murder and like conspiracy to murder and conduct unbecoming a Marine, and they get convicted of that conduct unbecoming. So, as Max indicated, you being a Marine, you need to follow orders, and the whole movie is about that. And then at the very end, you get the not guilty, not guilty, guilty.
Hmm.
How did you feel about that guilty verdict?
I so I understood because it was not guilty for murder, not guilty for conspiracy, and what was the third charge that they were found guilty of?
They were charged with conduct unbecoming a Marine. So that's the whole do the right thing.
Right.
So if you follow the order, you can't be guilty. But if you if that's your excuse, if the jury says, okay, you were just following orders, but the jury says you killed Santiago, and so you have a tension there, and for me that was disturbing.
Right. Like I understood the thought process behind it. I just thought that it was very much unfair because if you're in the military and you're trained to think a certain way, you're never going to challenge your superiors. So everything you do aligns with that. You know, you're doing exactly what you're told. But I think the idea was that they still needed to be punished somehow, just so that they don't walk away, I guess, unscathed. But yeah, it bothered me, but I definitely understood it, because I
Well,
do.
you're totally right about that, and it kind of goes back to that elevator speech, that theme. I mean, a guy died, a private died,
Right.
and sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, it's okay. It's okay. I don't even remember what I was gonna say, but but
Well, they got dishonorably discharged too. That's a big deal, especially for the taller guy. He kept saying he does not want to get dishonorably discharged because he said, "What will I do if I go back home dishonorably discharged? What am I supposed to do then?"
Yeah,
right.
and Max, the whole idea of the guilty verdict seems to suggest from the jury, hey, you should have done something else.
You should
You
have
had a code
questioned.
red order.
Yeah,
You had an order to, beat up Private Santiago, but you should have done something else. And what's pretty clear is you can't just ignore the order. So I guess the jury is saying you should have done something else. You should have gone to someone else.
yeah. It's like what Lieutenant Weinberg said about the Nuremberg defense that the Nazis did. They said, "Well, I was just following orders." Well, the court in 1940s, they said, "No, you can't just say, you killed all these people and you were just following orders. That is not going to fly." So that court believed in integrity, and this court did too. So it mirrored that ruling of you can't just go kill somebody who's your superior tells you to kill.
Yeah, the other thing that he talked about was the massacre in Vietnam, the My Lai
Yeah.
massacre, and the fact that it's one thing to be in a battle and to be in a war zone, but for you to kill the quote unquote innocent village, um, you're gonna pay. And here, these two defendants had to pay. So it comes down to the fairness issue.
Yeah. The one thing that bothered me most, was that the white, soldier, it seemed as though he was pretty much the type of person that could only follow orders, that he wasn't necessarily an independent thinker.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it just, I was like, man, I mean, I feel like maybe he should have gotten a lesser charge because of his inability to think freely. Because I don't think it was even just the fact that he was a soldier. It was just that, like, maybe it was a disability or some sort of learning issue, but so I kind of felt bad for him more so
And
than
what you're
the,
saying too is that he kind of lacked the intent, right? That he didn't have the intent to do it.
Well,
right.
that's a good point, but you have Dawson, who is the superior kind of defendant, and you have Downey, who seemed to have some challenges, shall we say. And you certainly get into the intent issue, but the question is, did you intend to tie up the private, and did you intend to stuff a rag in his mouth and beat him up? And so that's pretty clearly that was what his intent was, to do that.
Right.
And my other issue, sorry if I go off on a rant, but that doctor who was supposed to have cleared the soldier who died, his physical, he should have noticed that there was an issue. So he should have been charged too, because he didn't do his job.
Yeah, that doctor was not a great witness. And Demi Moore's character saw the problems, and remember, she moved to strike him. But motions to strike expert witnesses back then, this was 1992, same year that My Cousin Vinny came out. Motions to strike witnesses, those didn't really get granted very often back then, 33 years ago. But now they get granted a little bit more. So if she did that same motion today, then there's a higher probability, in my opinion, that that doctor would have been stricken from the record.
Should have been stripped of his title. He didn't do his job. And who knows how many other soldiers have medical issues that were overlooked? I'm just saying.
Who knows? I know, yeah. Santiago should not have been running. That caused him to be weakened to the point where just a rag that was halfway down his throat was able to kill him.
Right.
Right. Totally right. Yeah.
All right, let's do some more Keith questions. Here we go, Shirelle. Let's see. What do you want to know from somebody who's been doing Surety for about 40 years now? What's a question that kind of presses your mind?
So I'm going to talk about my experience, and then I'd like to know what Keith's experience was, because I know for me, sometimes when I have a principal who's a little more aggressive, because I'm still, fairly new. It's only been about 5-6 years that I've been in Surety, handling claims. But what do you do when you have a principal who's a little more aggressive? Do you have any particular strategies? Are you just firm with them? Like, what do you do to kind of keep control over the situation, I guess?
Well, I think it all goes back to understanding, and I think that is so hard, so difficult, and we all certainly, I want to be right, and I'm so right. If you'll just listen to me, I'll tell you why I am right, which usually means you, Mr. Principal, are wrong, and that rarely works. I think we have to start with the fact that to be a contractor, to be a principal, they are going to be aggressive. I mean, it's almost required. That's going to happen. So you're going to be dealing with aggressive people who believe they are correct. And the challenge, and it's a big challenge, and you have to deal with this, is how can you understand them, and how can you convey to them that you understand what they are dealing with. Your investigation may indicate that it's over here to the right, and they're saying no, it's over here to the left, and you have to say, I hear what you're saying, and you have to understand them and slowly get them to move more to the middle. At least that's your goal. That's your attempt. And sometimes it doesn't work, Shirelle. And sometimes you have to look at the other options that the surety has to get the project completed. That needs to be a last resort, but sometimes that comes up.
So what's the difference between surety and insurance? Like, how do you explain it to a group of college kids that surety and insurance may be different?
That's a real challenge, and I think you have to explain it to a lot of people: the judge, the jury, the obligee, the principal, certainly, because oftentimes the principal thinks you're an insurance company, you're another deep pocket,
Yeah.
and they kind of forget about the fact that they are really supposed to help you have no loss, and you have indemnitors who are usually the company owners. But to answer your question, the difference, you have insurance it's a risk tool, and it's a deep pocket, and it's available to pay when an accident occurs. And so you're trying to guard against an accident. And surety, on the other hand, is supposed to be, you really should never have to look to the surety because the principal is going to get the job done. But maybe they don't, and you need the surety to help you come in and solve the problem. But then the surety is going to claim back against the principal and the indemnitors, the company owners. And so you do have a fault issue. Whose fault? Over here, usually with insurance, you have an accident and you're not concerned about whose fault it is.
Right.
You're concerned about spreading that loss. Over here, you have much more of an issue of who caused the problem.
We're processing that. That's what Shirelle and I are doing right now. Our brains are processing all that.
Yes.
A lot.
Well, it's only taken me about 40 years to get to fair understanding. I say fair because I think there is still a lot more to know, but I think that's so important for the obligee to understand, hey, if it's, partly your fault, and oftentimes it is, whether you have change orders or impacts to the schedule or whatever, you don't usually have an accident. You don't have, a wall falling down or maybe a 2x4 going through the side of a building, which would be the purpose of having insurance.
So our editor Blaze asked me to ask you, what are your two favorite surety opinions besides Perlman?
Probably on the issue we're talking about, there's a case called City of Green River. It's a case out of Wyoming.
Wyoming, yeah.
I think it's really important it explains that difference between insurance and surety. And it explains that, look, the surety, and Shirelle, this comes back to you, the surety has rights. They have a right to be put on notice, to be alerted, to have an opportunity to solve the problem. And that's so important. I think the other case would be in Texas, the issue went up to the Supreme Court, and for a long time we had all kinds of issues about bad faith, and bad faith applies to insurance companies over here. Really shouldn't apply to sureties, and we have a split across the country, but there's a case called CAT contracting where this went up to the Supreme Court of Texas, and they talked about the difference between suretyship and insurance. And they said, look, the surety can be liable for or responsible for certain things as practice of insurance, but not for the bad faith tort. And that was a huge issue.
Yeah, and CAT contracting, I think, was around 95. And there was just this onslaught of surety opinions right around 1995 that really shaped the way suretyship is viewed today in jurisprudence.
Well, Shirelle, I think it's so important, for people to understand the role of the surety. What is your experience with that issue? Do you encounter people who think of suretyship as more of an insurance product? You're there as a deep pocket?
Yes, all the time. And even when I've explained it multiple times, there's the understanding is still, oh, well, it's still like insurance, So I kind of gave up. And when people ask me what I do, I just say insurance, just to make my life easier, because, I feel like a dork trying to explain this to them. And it's like, I'm telling you exactly what it is, and you're still saying insurance. So I just gave up.
Well, it goes back to that whole A Few Good Women and that empathy and that understanding. you can explain it to someone, you can't understand it for them, but you pretty much have to deal with their problems and their issues, and along the way try to give them that knowledge. But it's so key, it's so important that they understand what a surety bond is all about. And Max, oftentimes they don't understand what the surety bond is all about.
Yeah, we're often dealing with what we call unsophisticated principals or even unsophisticated obligees, especially on the payment bond side. You've got these contractors that are just trying to get paid because the average lifespan of a subcontractor is shorter than an NFL running back. So it's very, very, very short. So they don't have all this time to become very sophisticated on how to process surety claims. They just want to get their lifeblood, which is their money.
Well, Max, let me ask you, even when you have a very sophisticated obligee, talk about the difference between bonding the contract and bonding the project.
Oh, yeah.
And do you encounter issues with, when you have substantial completion of the project, but you haven't complied, the principal hasn't complied with all the terms of the contract?
That's a big one, especially in Texas and Florida, which is where I'm at. So in Texas, the substantial completion, which means you can use the building for its intended purpose, is supposed to discharge the performance bond surety. Florida is the same way, where the bond is supposed to just cover the physical work rather than the contract. So in a lot of states, I'd even say the majority of states, the bond covers the contract, which includes all the obligations, even the post-substantial completion obligations. But in some states, a minority of states, including Texas and Florida, the bond is supposed to just cover actual completion of the building and not all the more peripheral requirements in the contract.
That's why it's so important to RTFB, read the full bond, read the contract, and understand the law that is governing your transaction.
Yeah, and that's hard because it's kind of sporadic. It's like what I said about the mid-90s being a hotspot of surety opinions. It really is across the whole country. There's just this odd spike in the mid-90s. I think the Surety.org organization was helping out with some amicus briefs, and those started to get in there. And the state Supreme Courts, like Texas and like Florida, they had surety opinions that came out in a favorable manner for sureties.
Max, I have a quick question. Around that time, how old were you?
95, I was 6 years old.
Wow.
And I actually helped on a couple of these cases. I remember I helped on a couple of them. I was like helping brainstorming because really it is like Keith would come home and, he would brainstorm and I would just be like, what are you thinking about? And he would tell me, because explaining it to a young child is pretty much the best way to actually show that you understand your case. If you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, or what we usually say is 10 or 12-year-old, but if you can't explain it to, and I was about that level, when I was 6, I had the acumen of a 12-year-old. Come on, right? But if you can't explain it to a very smart 6-year-old, then you're losing. That you don't have it. You don't have the grasp of the case like you need to have.
I think that's right, and that's so key. And Shirelle, being able to explain to people what surety is and how it's different from insurance is such a challenge. And we face that all day, every day. So we have to have a pretty good story, what we do and why it's different. I've thought about it a lot, and somebody asked me, "Hey, what do you do?" My response is usually I solve problems. I help to provide solutions to problems, and a surety is a problem solver. They are there to provide assistance in trying to get to the finish line. They're not there as a deep pocket to pay, which is more insurance than suretyship.
Right.
And that's kind of why we like these arbitrations with sophisticated AAA construction lawyers, because they understand surety law. If you go to a random judge, the odds that they've even heard surety are so low that you can count the number of judges who know surety on two hands, maybe even one hand.
Well, Max, if you become a judge, you'll be that sixth judge that knows what surety is.
Yeah, that would be fun. U.S. Supreme Court Justice. I'll change the way suretyship is viewed.
Right.
All right. So I guess it's time to get back to A Few Good Men. I mean, how excited, Shirelle, were you when you saw Noah Wiley? He was on the stand. He's the John Carter from ER fellow sitting on the witness stand and being grilled about a code red. What is a code red? And he goes through all of that, and he's approached by the prosecutor, who is Kevin Bacon, saying, "Hey, here's a book. You're a Marine. The code red, it's got to be in this book. Show me where it's in the book." And of course, he can't do that. And then Tom Cruise, on cross-examination, says, "Hey, show me in this book where it says where the mess hall is located." Yeah. And
Right.
That he says,
a good counter. That was a good counter.
It was really great because he says, "You mean in the whole time you've been at Guantanamo, you never ate?" He said, "No, sir. 3 square meals a day." And Tom Cruise says, "Well, how'd you know where the mess hall was?" And he said, "I guess I just followed a bunch of hungry guys."
I like that cross-examination because he spoke very plainly. Tom Cruise, his character would speak with simple terms. He didn't use a lot of legal jargon. He didn't say, the modus operandi of the defendants. He didn't use any of that because that kind of flowery language is not intended for juries. Juries are just 12 peers. They're not lawyers. They're usually not lawyers because usually you strike lawyers from voir dire, so the people that he's speaking to, he's speaking right on their level, and I think they understood that. And that's why Demi Moore said, you have this special gift to connect with these jurors. They believe you. They trust you. And, Tom Cruise is kind of very nonchalant about it. He's like, "Oh, really? I didn't even recognize that."
Well, I think that's what's so key, and it applies every day. Before you get to a jury trial, you have to be with that obligee or whomever principal you're talking to, and you have to say it in a way that, number one, they understand it, but number two, there's a rationale to it.
Right. Definitely important to make sure that you're able to connect with the people that you're working with. Because like you said, most of these principals are not necessarily sophisticated. They just kind of do what they do. So you got to be able to talk to them like a regular person, and then it allows them to trust you. Because I think sometimes using big words,
so difficult.
Yeah, I think sometimes using these big words and speaking, what people call lawyer language, it kind of may make the person, on the other end hear you and think, "Oh, this person is pretentious," or "This person thinks I'm dumb," or whatever the case may be.
Or they could get on the defensive, right? They could be like, "Oh gosh, they're thinking about, how are they going to topple me?" And they kind of get on the defensive when you hit them with that big jargon. They're like, "Oh gosh, I zoomed in."
Well, that is correct. I mean, what you're trying to do is have the empathy and understanding, and you have to work hard to create that environment because your job is to first understand and then be understood. Well, it's really hard to do job one, to understand. And we get into active listening and parroting, repeat back to people exactly what they're saying so that they understand that you understand what they said. People want to be understood. That's why it's so important to use names. So, people named Shirelle like to hear when you say Shirelle, and people named Max like to hear when you say, "Hey, Max." And it's just one of many things that's so important to being to understanding, and that's why it's so important to make sure you have a very good team that can understand issues.
I like that because there's these consultants that they help you kind of grasp what's going on, but they don't do that full understanding. So you can really tell when a surety consultant has both the brain and the heart into it, where they're trying to understand with their brain and their heart. And that's hard because that's not usually on the task list. It doesn't say, have a heart to heart with the principal. But really, that's often what you do need. You need a heart to heart to get to the in game solution. And it's just like what they had on their board in Danny Caffey's apartment. They had the in game on in the words of how they're going to do the in game on there. And I zoomed in again. I keep
You
doing
keep
the
moving. Well, you
in-game
said heart to heart.
Yeah.
Heart to heart brings up a TV show, probably. Yeah, there you go. Back when, but the whole point was, hey, you have two people there on the team. You have Mr. Hart and Mrs. Hart, and it was very important that you have both so that you have a full understanding of what's going on.
All right, Shirelle, what do you think? To Kill a Mockingbird next, or Lincoln Lawyer, or what are you thinking?
So thankfully, I've already seen To Kill a Mockingbird, but I could use a refresher.
You
But
saw
either
the one from the 60s? Which one? Or the Matthew McConaughey and Samuel L. Jackson one?
no, the To Kill a Mockingbird. I think I saw the older version.
Okay, the Gregory Peck one.
I don't know these people's
Yeah.
names. I just watch.
I don't know these people's names either. I just watch, yeah. But Lincoln Lawyer was really good. That was Matthew McConaughey. That was pretty good.
I think I
I
saw
would
that,
like
but
to.
it was a while ago.
Yeah. We'll figure it out. And we'll have some
Yeah.
guests on and we'll continue the show. I think that's it for episode 3, unless you guys have anything else.
Nope, that was good. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everybody. 48 minutes is the sweet spot, I think. So we'll see you next week.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Comedy Law, yeah, we're here to play. Max, Shirelle, Keith leading the way. Lawyers with laughs and jokes to slay. Tune in, folks, it's Comedy Law today.